Lena Banks, certified financial planning professional and small business coach based here in Austin, Texas. Welcome back to your financial therapy for the week. Thanks as always for tuning in and for joining me on this journey. Don't forget to like us, give us a review, and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I'm really excited about this next episode because it talks a little bit about, some happy things that might occur for you in your financial life and kind of thinking ahead so that when those things do happen for you, you're prepared. So this episode is called The Great Wealth Transfer, What You Need to Know. The Great Wealth Transfer. So obviously, I think for a lot of us who are kind of in a sandwich situation where our parents are getting up there in years, but we also have children, it's a tough time financially to juggle all of those things. And if you have multiple obligations on either side of you in your financial life, you might be banking on the great wealth transfer. And so I wanted to do an episode about this because I've been hearing more and more about it. For those of you guys who we need to start with a definition. The great wealth transfer refers to an unprecedented, ongoing, and projected shift of roughly 84 to 124 trillion with a T dollars in assets from baby boomers and the silent generation to Gen X, millennials, and other entities like charities between the years of right now and all the way up until 2045 to 2050. So we've got about 25 years of this kind of rolling transfer of all of these built up over a generation or two or three of wealth that is set to be transferred down to the next generations. And that is a huge windfall. Obviously, $124 trillion is huge, and it is driven primarily by these generations that have really had a leg up in building wealth, especially in America, around different assets, including real estate, equities, stocks, and business assets. So things that they've invested in that might have, gone gangbusters over the last several decades. So that is what the great wealth transfer is. It is absolutely real. And also, at the same time, it is not something that any of us should be banking on as far as the path out of kind of the affordability and debt crisis that we're currently sitting in if you're just the average American. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this and help us be a little more clear-eyed about what it all means, because it is happening, and while it's wonderful to see, as I said, it's not a panacea for all of our financial woes. So a few things to know about the great wealth transfer to kind of start us off, and then I'm going to give you some do's and some don'ts around, what to do when you're thinking about gifting or when you're in a position to receive some financial windfall, some sort of dollars. Okay, so the first thing is there might not actually be as much transferred down as you think there may be. A lot of people, they kind of not bank on receiving an inheritance, but if they know that their parents are, at least comfortable, living a comfortable lifestyle, you might be thinking, okay, well, I'll get a share of the house if I have siblings, or, maybe there's a retirement fund that they won't completely use up. Maybe there is like real cash money somewhere that you're thinking you might get a share of. And so the very first thing, though, is that there might not actually end up being as much as you think because of things like long-term care expenses. Most people don't realize that in order to be in a nursing home or any type of assisted living, to have home health care, really any of the options are going to probably cost around 6 figures per year. And that's just the living expenses related to and long-term care health expenses related to getting old. So it has nothing even to do with if you wanted to travel, if you wanted to have some sort of expensive purchase like a new car or some sort of splurge that you were really interested in as an older person. If you are committed to remaining independent, so you want to stay in your own home, that's going to cost you even more than these other options like an actual nursing home or even a home health professional at a certain point. If you're having that 24/7 care, that's a 6-figure proposition. And so assisted living is great. Nursing homes can be pretty good if you find the right one, especially if it's something that is, smaller quarters. You can keep your own quarters, private quarters. That's all really exciting, but it is also very, very expensive. And so for some retirees or our parents who maybe have not saved adequately enough to cover long-term care expenses, those retirement funds are going toward that level of care. And typically, even if you just need that level of care, and I say just because sometimes it is a much or longer extended process, even if you just need that care for a few years, that's $300,000 that is not going to necessarily be passed down in wealth, but that is going to be used toward funding the care of one individual in their later years. So that expense, inflation expenses, so obviously as time goes on, things get more expensive. Reverse mortgages are now something that is very prevalent. If a person is living in their home and doesn't want to leave their home, reverse mortgage can be a great vehicle for saving money and having more cash flow. People also want to spend on living life, which is also more expensive. So going on vacations or eating out or just doing things that really fulfill them, hobbies that never got realized while they were younger. So spending on things that matter most to them is important. And so, who can begrudge a retiree spending on these things? So that's the first thing, is there just might not be as much really waiting in that $124 trillion pot as we think, because so many of these things are not taken care of as they might have been with Social Security and Medicare and things like that. They're not being covered as substantially as maybe in generations past, and so we have to be mindful of that. The second thing is a lot of what is happening, a lot of the wealth transfer that we are likely to see is happening among the already wealthy, the uber wealthy, the folks in the top 1% who typically receive more federal benefits, tax benefits to giving while living than most of us do. And that's just, raw facts. Right now, in 2026, the gift exemption per person is $19,000. So that means that you can give tax-free $19,000 to, let's say, a child who requires some sort of assistance or boost in their income, $19,000 per year. And that's per person. So if you have a spouse, they could also give their child that same $19,000 tax-free. That sort of giving is pretty substantial and would be pretty difficult to actually sustain with your average retirement fund. $38,000 a year is not a small amount. But what we see primarily in the financial world is that those types of things are happening more among the wealthiest folks than they are among your average Joe. And in addition to that, estate planning, things that help essentially shelter those dollars from taxation, those things have been expanded significantly in the last few years. And so what you're seeing is a lot of the wealth transfer is going from wealthy people to equally wealthy people. And essentially what they're doing is sheltering it from having to pay taxes on any of that wealth. And that's, their prerogative, certainly, and it is definitely within the law. There's a $15 million lifetime exemption on gift taxes. So at a certain point, you start seeing that the people who have the majority of this $124 trillion are giving it to friends, family, folks who are likely running in a similar or, in fact, the same circle as they are. And so, the second thing to kind of keep in mind to temper the excitement around the great wealth transfer is that it is likely going from wealthy people to other wealthy people. Now, the third thing to think about is that it really is one thing to have money or to get money, and it's another thing to keep money. That's a pretty standard thing in financial planning. Typically, the more money you have, the more ways you find to spend it. And this really applies whether you're gifter, whether the person who is giving is living, so that it is giving while living, or if it is truly an inheritance that occurs after that person has passed away. And so the things that you need to be thinking about, regardless of whether your benefactor is alive or sadly not, are some of the same things. And so I'm going to give you some do's and don'ts around what to do when you're giving money versus when you're receiving money, and how we can just kind of be more mindful about it and about what that really means, what it really means to get a transfer of wealth and what you might do with it. So the first thing, the first do is to make a financial plan. I mean, this is, I think, an obvious thing, but not necessarily obvious in practice. So as a gifter, you want to have a financial plan that includes how you want to give your money away. And as a giftee, if you're the one receiving funds, you want to have a financial plan to understand how you want to spend or invest it. And starting there is the most important thing, because what you don't want to do, this is the first don't, is expect the cash or the money you give or to receive to last. And, that sounds kind of harsh, but there have been multiple studies about how when a person inherits money, and this can go for, again, money that's gived while lived, it disappears almost within, certainly within 5 years. Most people don't make it past 2 or 3. And that is irrespective of the actual amount of money. So you would think, okay, well, if somebody's getting $5,000, I can see how it would be gone in a hot second. But if somebody was getting $500,000, surely that lasts. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is our spending and our splurging is in proportion to the money that we received. It's why so many lottery winners end up bankrupt and or worse off than when they started. So whether a person inherits $5,000, $50,000, or $500,000, most of that inheritance will be completely wiped out within a few years. And so if that goes for inheritance that you receive after someone's death, that also goes for the gifts that people give while living. So if you make a financial plan, then you can expect to extend that cash for a little bit longer. But the first thing that you should not do is expect that money is actually going to have a long shelf life and somehow change your life if you don't have a financial plan to make it so. So really, this is a tried and true financial advisor's kind of rule, is that anytime you get any sum of money, large or small, and you're wondering what to do with it, consult a financial advisor that you trust. Doesn't have to be someone expensive that you pay a lot of money to, or a money manager or a wealth manager. It doesn't have to be someone like that, but just somebody that you trust to help guide you in how to not spend that money, but invest it in something that will benefit you long term. So do make a financial plan and ask if your giftee has one as well. And don't expect that cash that you give or that you receive to last more than a few years, particularly if you don't have a sound investment plan. So typically, a few things do kind of work directly after someone gets a large sum of money. Debts are usually first. People pay off their debts, and that's a great thing. It doesn't always have to be the first thing that happens. Certainly, if you have things with high interest, you want to pay them off. If you have credit cards, any sort of revolving debt, especially if you're being charged interest on it, that would be something that you would want to pay off. But especially if the debt is sitting at a low interest rate, it might be to your benefit to invest those dollars rather than pay off debts. But most people do choose to pay off debts first. Then they start going into some of the splurges, like a new car or jewelry or clothes, expensive vacations, remodeling, things like that. And those are the decisions that a financial advisor can help you with and guide you on, so that you understand exactly how you're spending your money and you're not kind of blowing it as you go. So the next do. Invest in things for the future. So think homes, land, property, or directly paying off debts that can increase cash flow and financial freedom. So I mentioned that it's not always the best idea to immediately pay off debt. You need to think about some considerations like what kind of interest rate you are paying on the debt, what kind of interest you could receive by investing those dollars instead. And those kinds of concepts are good things to talk through either with your financial partner or your financial advisor. Things like gifting even a car for transportation, paying off tuition, student loans, healthcare debt, those are all pretty immediate ways to impact someone's life in a positive way, create more cash flow, create potentially more freedom, more opportunity for that person without simply handing them a bunch of money and potentially watching it go down the drain. And I know that sounds very prescriptive. It's like, well, I'm giving them this money, so shouldn't I give it to them for whatever they want? And that's absolutely true. If you have the $19,000, $38,000 or more to simply give to a friend, family member, someone out there who you love and care about, and you want them to be able to have free reign over how they spend it and use it, then that's great. I think especially for those who are giving while living, it can be validating, this approach of focusing on these real world practical gifts that would be the same amount. It would have the same financial impact on you as the giver. But for the giftee, it creates more space for them to spend their dollars on what they prioritize while you're kind of taking care of the fundamentals. It's really difficult emotionally and mentally for someone who comes into found money to spend it on something that is a necessity or some sort of basic priority rather than a splurge. And so once people pay off debts, typically you go straight to the splurge instead of these kind of crucial areas where someone could really make an impact on another person's life. So the counter to that of investing in things for the future or things that impact someone's life in a positive way, their cash flows and their financial freedom, the don't of that is investing in things that aren't actually investments. And what do I mean by that? So unless you have a clear head about a new car, and research has shown that within 19 days of receiving an inheritance, a beneficiary will purchase a new car, which that's pretty shocking. If you're 70% of folks with an inheritance and you within the first year of receiving that inheritance go out and purchase yourself a brand new car, you're obviously not alone. But it does beg the question, is that really an investment? And I think we all understand that cars depreciate immediately upon leaving the lot. And so it's not really an investment. That is another debt that you're taking on. And you're taking on a debt that is more likely than not going to last longer than the funds that you're excited about having. And unless you're paying off that car in full, in cash, that means that you're adding debt to your plate that it actually is not covered by said inheritance. You might qualify for that new car, and that's exciting, but it's not something that is an actual investment. So that type of spending is kind of one of the reasons why an inheritance tends to go fast, because after you start the spending spree, it's really hard to stop. New clothes, new watches, getting tips, investment tips from friends and family, and kind of throwing your money at things to see what sticks because you have it available. It can become a slippery slope. So you want to get to the point where, as I said, you have a financial plan. You don't necessarily expect that money to last more than a few years, and you are mentally preparing yourself for that fact. You are investing in things for your future that would benefit your cash flows, and that you are not investing in things that are not actually investments. And the final do is to figure out what's important to you. This is so important. It is really difficult to get clients typically to tell me what their goals are. And that's because many people have not thought in depth about what their financial goals are and why they're doing them. So, or why they're aiming for them. So if your goal is to have more financial freedom, or just freedom in general to spend time with your family, or maybe to travel, or maybe it is something tangible like owning your own home, you want to ask yourself, what about those things you'd enjoy? why is that your goal? Why would you enjoy it so much? Because there's almost always something underneath that goal. The things you most enjoy about a new car or a new boat or an all expenses paid cruise could potentially be easily found in a less expensive alternative, like a 2-year-old car that's still perfectly fabulous, or renting a boat or something like that. I mean, I'm not trying to get too prescriptive with shifting gears here, but figuring out what's important to you, and more importantly, why. What's the feeling that is providing you? And honestly, seeing if you can get that feeling for cheap. Because throwing your money at something when you're not quite even sure that you must do it that way in order to get the same fulfillment of your goal it can be dangerous. So you want to look for those less expensive alternatives, figure out what's important to you so that you can do that. And the final don't is, don't be afraid to sacrifice. When you're receiving money or when you're giving money, you want to still be living within your current or long-term means. You don't want to be shifting your behavior so much that 5 years down the road, you're not actually going to be satisfied with the status quo because you have ramped it up so much or you've given so much away that you're no longer comfortable. So you want to be in a position where you can say no, even when you can technically afford to say yes. Even when you can technically afford to say yes, if you have a plan in place that tells you exactly what you can and can't do, don't be afraid to sacrifice or to live within your budget. Those budgets are boundaries, and remembering what's important to you in the long run will help guide your decision making and financial steps going forward. So, I hope that this was like kind of a thinking episode. I didn't give a whole lot of answers here, but the great wealth transfer, what we need to be thinking about is really that there may not be as much wealth out there as you think, and it sounds like a fantastic number, $124 trillion all flowing down to the next generations. But a lot of people need that money to actually live life, especially in the last few years of life. A lot of that transfer is happening among uber wealthy people already. And even if you receive that money, even if it's received while the person is still alive, living, giving while living, that money might not stick around as long as you think. So you want to make a financial plan. Don't expect that money to last very long. Invest in things for the future that give you the best potential for long-term financial freedom. Don't invest in things that aren't true investments. And then do figure out what's important to you, because it will help you set your boundaries and your budget, and potentially say no even when you can technically afford to say yes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Send me some feedback and comments at the number below in the show notes. I am so happy to be with you again this week, and I'll be back next week for another episode.